Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my phantom thoughts. In this episode, I yammer on about the cost of PDFs for almost 20 minutes, followed by another visit to the world of the Dragon Slayers, where orcs are fighting tribesmen. So let's get to it. What I'm talking about this episode is PDFs. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm a big believer that people should get paid for the work that they do, and particularly in an age where, pretty much for the entirety of the internet, digital media, digital products have been kind of uh, looked down upon, for lack of a better term, devalued. That's the word I'm looking for, devalued. And of course, a lot of this has its place in the origins of the internet as a more public setting where people didn't know what to make for it. Even didn't know what to make for it, and so a lot of people and a lot of business were just putting stuff out for free, just looking at it more as ad space than anything else, and not as marketplace. And now, as time has gone by, there's resistance kind of built into the culture of the internet, for lack of a better term, that things should be free or heavily discounted if they're offered in a digital form on the internet. So I'm not saying that PDFs should be, $5 or whatever when the equivalent book is 10 times that amount. But what I am saying is that it looks to me like the pricing of PDFs, particularly by, let's say, more established companies, is going up. And what kicked this off was the brouhaha over Goodman Games printing a version, two versions actually, a 5e version and a Dungeon Crawl Classics version of Judges Guild City State of the Invincible Overlord. Now, that's a product that I've been peripherally aware of for probably since the time when it originally came out. And, it's not something I've ever actively sought out, but it was one of those things that it's a lot of people have a lot of reverence for. And if it was something I could get my hands on, then certainly I think it would be something worth looking over if the price was right. Of course, we have the problem in the hobby of the collector's edition or just collectors in general who just drive prices up, grabbing things that they just want for nostalgia reasons or just to say they have it and it's on their shelf or what have you. That's another whole issue. And that may have some purchase in what's going on here. So I looked at their campaign on BackerKit, Goodman Games campaign on BackerKit for the City State of the Invincible Overlord, and holy moly. Now, they do tout it as 800 pages of product. So it's not like you're looking at a singular rule book or a novel or something like that might be between them 200, 250, 300, 350 pages. But 800 pages, you're talking about probably 3 or 4 books worth of material, depending on the books themselves. So something comparable, say, to the Dungeons and Dragons kind of standard issue, the way WotC is putting them out, as they usually have when they have a new edition. They have the package deal of Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual, which combined are probably somewhere in that 800 page range. Maybe it's down in the 700s. Maybe it's even down to 600s. I don't think it's down to 600s. I think they're more than 200 pages each. I've got copies of the 5th edition over here somewhere, but I'm not going to be bothered to open them just to see how many pages in a book. But they're equivalent, is what I would say. And Judges Guild wasn't the only thing I looked at. I was looking at possibly acquiring the Necromancer's game from Necromancer Games, which is being used kind of as a brand now, I think, by Frog God Games. I remember listening to the Dungeon Plunger podcast the Dungeon Plunger podcast. Let me get that out. And there was an interview with the owner of Frog God Games and had been a previous owner of Necromancer Games with someone else and had finally bought out his co-owner of that group because his co-owner didn't want to be associated with that because for a lot of reasons. Go listen to the interview on the Dungeon Plunger podcast. It's a great interview. The point is, I was looking at the game, kind of an old school, maybe even pre-D&D style of play, tapping into that initial, surge that led to this industry. And so I was looking at their prices and also His Majesty the Worm, which is an RPG that I've looked at off and on and have always not bought because of the pricing. Because and the reason I'm looking mainly at PDFs is because, well, just physical space. I've been buying mostly on PDFs for some time now when I've been buying things. So to try to bring this all together, again, I went to the City State of the Invincible Overlord campaign on BackerKit, $130 for the PDF version of the product. And it's touted as 5 books or booklets, and it's also being sold as a box set for $200. Now, the box set does not include PDF copies. So it's a straight $200 for a physical version. It's $130 for PDF. And that was what struck me as strange, because the PDFs by themselves are basically 2/3 the cost of what the print product would be. And that seems a bit out of line, more than the actual, just price, but more than just the $130 is that it's being represented as 2/3 the cost of a print version. So if you look at the production of a printed product like this, you're looking at, of course, the content itself, the intellectual property, the author or authors' work product, and being paid for their time and their, like I said, IP, intellectual property. And then also you're looking into the cost of formatting and editing and, whatever various programs you need to have available to put it in the proper form to be published, whether through PDF or through print or through both, usually in most cases. So those are all expenses that are bound up in that cost. And then, of course, profit. I'm not against profit. Like I said, I think artists should get paid. And then for the physical product, you're going to add things like the physical cost of manufacturing, the cost of materials, ink, paper, whatever the cover is made out of, whether it's a soft cover or hard cover. And then, of course, things like shipping and the warehousing and the distribution and all that good stuff. So obviously, because of those add-ons at the end, a physical product is going to be and should be more than a digital product, because the digital product does not have all the physical manufacturing and transport and handling costs associated with having a physical product. But what I've been used to seeing until, I guess I've noticed this over the last few years, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 5 or what have you, but what I've noticed, what I've seen beforehand was you were probably looking at a digital copy, particularly if it was being included in a bundle, as being represented as maybe a quarter of the cost, maybe a third, maybe a fifth, depending, to give some, give some perspective. The other products I looked at, number one, I went to what is, Wizards of the Coast, which is, owned by Hasbro, which, everybody is always talking about the greed and shoddiness that they have because it's this big greedy corporation that doesn't care about people or products or the hobby or their customers or anything else. What are they looking at? So the 2024 bundle, which I think would be equivalent page count wise with what the Goodman Games is offering with the City State of the Invincible Overlord, is $100. $179.97. So essentially $180 for all 3 games plus PDFs. And looking at some of the individual entries, for example, the player's handbook is $49.95, $49.99, and then you can add a PDF to that for $10. So $59.99, so $60. So like I said, all 3 were for $180. That was physical and digital. So $60 for physical and digital for one. And they are parsing off that cost for the PDF for the digital only as $10 when it's bought with the physical. I haven't poked around to see what it is when they're offering the digital for just itself. It's probably in the $20 or $30 range would be my guess. Something I probably should look at. But as part of a bundle, the PDF cost is basically 1/5 the cost of the physical book, and 1/6 of the total cost. Okay, so I paused for a moment to look, and it lists D&D Beyond lists all of the core books as starting at $29.99. So since the physical is $49.99 and the physical plus the digital is $59.99, I'm guessing the $29.99 is the PDF alone. So the PDF alone is basically 60% of the cost of just a physical copy. So that does put that more or less in line with what Goodman Games is charging for the Judges Guild product, where the PDF alone is roughly two thirds the cost of just the physical product. So that's roughly equivalent for them. So looking at the Necromancer's game in their Kickstarter and now the post Kickstarter, you can get a $60 PDF. That's 320 pages, and $110 gets you physical and PDF. So the PDF alone is just over half the cost of physical and PDF combined. So that is a little lower from a percentage basis of viewpoint of what City State of the Invincible Overlord is purely PDF per versus just physical. So looking at His Majesty the Worm, the PDF by itself is $40. The hardcover, when it's available, and they've restocked it, I think, at least once, maybe twice by this point, and they're out again over at Exalted Funeral. But when it's available, it's $60 for print plus PDF. So the PDF is 2/3 of the cost of print plus PDF. So you have a couple of situations with the Necromancer's game and His Majesty the Worm where just the PDF is more than half to 2/3 the cost of physical plus PDF versus City State of the Invincible Overlord and D&D, where the PDF by itself is about 2/3 the cost of just the physical by itself, not physical plus PDF. But if you look at it from a content perspective, where City State of the Invincible Overlord is giving you 800 pages for about $130 for a PDF, versus D&D, where the 3 books, which would cost you $90 for just the PDFs, is probably also roughly that same amount of product. Then when you look at the Necromancer's game, it's a $60 PDF, which is lower, almost half the City State of the Invincible Overlord cost. Well, a little less than half of the City State of the Invincible Overlord cost, and about 2/3 of the Dungeons and Dragons cost for the 3 books, but that's for 320 pages of content. So it's less than half the content. And then His Majesty the Worm, which is a $40 PDF, which is the lowest of any of them, is about 400 pages. It's 404 pages of content. So half the content of the WotC offering, the Goodman Games offering, but the price of the PDF is almost is well, it's more less than half of what just PDFs alone would be for Dungeons and Dragons, and less than a third of what Goodman's Games is looking for the City State of the Midst of Overlord if you're looking at pages of content versus price. And I know I've been staggering along on this, and Greg, what are you looking for? Well, the answer is I'm not quite sure. I have not balked in the past at paying $20, $25 for a PDF. So I guess my line right now has been probably in the $30 range, probably about what Dungeons and Dragons is charging for PDFs only. That $29.99 cost is probably about where I say, whoa there, I'm just paying this for just digital. Now, I'd be the first to admit, I don't know how much cost you get in a product for the part that both digital and print use, the editing, the software, the IP, what have you, versus what costs are added when you go to physical, where you're looking at materials and assembly and uh, shipping and distribution and things like that. I'm not sure, how do those costs go? I know way back in the day when hardback books, novels would be $25, $22, $27, especially when they were, brand new, straight out a new book by a new author, that that the amount of that cost that was going to the author from that book, of that 25 books or so, was maybe $3, maybe $4. So less than a fifth of the cost was what was going to the author. And then, however much the company would pay an editor for. And at that time, that was toward the beginning of the digital revolution, I think, in publishing. So things like a typesetter, which you don't have now, you have, the program that you use and the person that uses it to format it correctly to be printed. But if that's still similar in the publishing model, is all that together even half the cost? So does it make sense for PDFs to be 50%, 60%, 70% the cost of a physical product by itself, or physical plus digital? That's a question I don't have answers to, but it's telling that over years, just the last few years, it seems to me that the prices of PDFs have been going way up, whereas before you were seeing a lot of PDFs, even from established companies, with products with lots of content in them, that would be in that $10, $15, $20, $25 range. And now you're getting 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks for PDFs. Now, some of that, I think, for City State of the Midst of Overlord is they're selling it with their, their classic reprint product line that they've been using for a lot of old AD&D modules that they've been printing in the past. And so I think there's a lot of that collector's mentality in it, that this is meant for collectors as much as anything else. So they feel like that justifies a higher price. But it seems to me like it's getting a little out of hand. But what do y'all think? What do y'all think about, after almost 20 minutes of me droning on about this? What do you think about the cost of PDFs and where it's going? And is there a point where it needs to stop? Or should it just keep on going up until maybe the difference between a PDF and physical product is barely noticeable? It's just negligible. It's $5, $10. And that's the difference between the physical and the purely digital. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Let me know.
And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. So we're back to the Raging Snouts orc tribe. This is the tribe that took over the dragon cave after the dragon slayers left and built a above ground fort essentially around it as their home, as their lair. Now, 3 days after they defeated a group of hippogriffs, they are encountering a group of dervishes. So why would a group of dervishes be there in the hills instead of out on the plains somewhere? Well, that was a good question. And when I rolled up for their treasure, I got what I thought was a pretty good answer. Because when I rolled for their treasure, I got 3 maps, which is obscenely low chance of that doing it because you only have 10% chance to get a map. So you have to do that 3 times to get 3 maps. And 2 of those maps, the location was in caves, basically at the location where you're at. So if you found that in a dungeon, it would be in caves in that dungeon. But what I interpret that as being is that somewhere in these hills, in this area where this dragon cave is, maybe deeper into the dragon cave, although it was just kind of a one-shot piece, is why I established it. But one of the caves in these hills around it, or in 2 sections, since there's 2 maps, there is some kind of treasure that the dervishes are looking for. So that explains why they came up into the hills. And later on, when I was sort of rolling on sort of the master campaign map, there were some plains not too far off from where the hills are. So there's a section of plains just between, kind of nestled in the foothills and at the foot of the mountains, not too far off. So when I rolled for surprise, who would anyone be surprised of these 2 groups? The orcs were surprised. So I interpreted that as they came upon this orc compound and the orcs didn't see them and they withdrew to make a plan. Now, dervishes, as part of their leveled character complement, have a fairly high level cleric among them. And so they have a cleric capable of casting insect plague and blade barrier. So the dervish plan is to cast insect plague, which should force the orcs to flee. And the only way they can flee is to open their gate down across the ditch and then come out. So cast the insect plague, cast blade barrier at the entrance, and then have their force be on hand to clean up any survivors. And that would be a very good plan because, insect plague is, it's 1 turn per level of the cleric. It's a range of 36 inches, so you can cast it far off. The area of effect is 36 inches in diameter and a 6-inch high cloud. The casting time is 1 turn, but if they don't know you're coming, then that doesn't make, and there's no saving throw. It brings a horde of creeping, hopping, and flying insects. These insects obscure vision, limiting it to 3 inches. Creatures within the insect plague sustain 1 hit point of damage for each melee round they remain in it. All creatures with fewer than 5 hit dice will have to check morale. Creatures with 2 or fewer hit dice, which that's basically all the orcs, automatically move at their fastest possible speed in a straight line, random direction until they are not more than 24 inches distant. Creatures with fewer than 5 hit dice which fail the morale check will behave likewise. So the orcs will basically be forced out of their compound by this spell. But what the dervishes don't know is about the Ring of Gax, the artifact which the orc leader has, and it has a 1 wish spell a day ability. So in this circumstance, I'm saying that when the insects descend and the orc leader sees the chaos, sees what's going on, sees that the compound is about to be opened and breached, and probably, maybe not the smartest, orcs aren't the smartest creatures, but probably pretty cunning, realizes that this may be an attack of some sort, is going to do something to wish the insects away. Now, how would he word that spell? So I came up with a few variations of what he could say. What he could direct the wish at these bugs, these pests, our foes. And he could say he wants them to be gone, to die or drop dead, to quit biting and stinging, attacking us, or to leave us alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a d6 for the first three choices, these bugs, these pests, our foes, and then a d4 for essentially the effect he wants, and see what the combination is and see if that would affect not only the bugs, but also the dervishes. So here we go. All right, so I got a 1 on each. So these bugs need to be gone. I wish these bugs to be gone. So the bugs will disperse. Well, the bugs will leave. Now the question is, will they disperse, or as the dervishes move in, will they attack them? So that's a question. And then that leads to the question is, what's summoned, is the summoning the end of the spell effect? I don't think it is, because it has a duration to it. So can the cleric disperse them on his own? Now, it only says that in the spell description that the plague lasts for 1 turn for each level of experience of the cleric casting the spell, and thereafter disperses. But since I'm not seeing anything in the spell description or anything in the Dungeon Master's Manual Guide or the Player's Handbook information that says you can end it early, I'm going to say it lasts. The swarm lasts as long as it's supposed to last. So the question is, will this swarm go after the dervishes? So I'm going to say there is a, let's see, if it's simply going away, they could go in any of several directions. So I'm going to roll a d8, and the dervishes are mainly to the, we'll say to the south of the compound. And so if they go southeast, southwest, or south, that will mean that they come upon the dervishes. So we'll say 1 is north, and that will put south at 5, so 4, 5, or 6. So here we go, D8. It's a 3. So the swarm just kind of flies and hops off. So that's basically how, setting all that up is basically how the dervishes use their surprise. So now we'll roll for initiative and get into battle. So I was getting ready to put everything together for the episode, and I realized that I didn't actually record the results of the battle between the dervishes and the orcs. So I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger here. I will get to that the next time. Got to go back to my notes and break that down. But I will get to that next time. So cliffhanger, tune in next episode. The opening theme of this podcast was Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you have any thoughts or feedback, you can get in touch with me by leaving me a voicemail on my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. That's 864-209-1441. Or through SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. That's www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. Or you can send me a message or an audio file on Discord, where I can be found the Pink Phantom, or through email, phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. That's phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. I don't have to play or read your feedback on the podcast if that is not your preference. Just let me know.